So much of the Green Capital, quite appropriately, is about solutions. But solutions to what challenges? Even in a city where people recognize the challenge of climate change, we did want to set a little bit of time aside to discuss what exactly are the climate change challenges that we're trying to address. So we thought, uncertain world. And we thought that would be an interesting way to include into the entire Green Capital program. We have to continue using arts as part of the conversation, just like I think we have to continue talking about climate change and sustainability issues and use that to connect to new people. I'm Rich Pancost.
Lucas Antics.
The Bristol Cabot.
Larry Doe Edwards.
Fossil Free.
Philippa Bailey.
Andrew Garrett.
In the end, the judges sort of said that they awarded Bristol the Green Capital for being the city with a sense of fun.
First thing was we turned the suspension bridge green on December the 31st, but the second more material thing we did was something which we called Bridging the Gap, which was intentionally a spectacle. It was a guy cycling from one of the bonded warehouses to the other on a tightrope with his wife slung underneath as ballast. And the idea of bridging the gap was literally, of course, he's cycling between the gap, and also metaphorically, that gap is between where we are now and where we aspire to be.
We went out and we specifically used the success of the Green Capital in order to take advantage of our cultural heritage in the city and create a really exciting, vibrant arts program.
The Bristol Whales were a spectacle in their own right. They were spectacular things to see. It's about the damage that marine plastic waste does to mammals. And that image went around the world.
The main change that has occurred that people have not seen would be launching a city-owned energy company. And the ambition of that would be to ultimately have a renewable tariff. So if you join this energy company, you will only be purchasing renewables. That will happen eventually. But also all the profits of the energy company will be devoted to energy efficiency measures and addressing fuel poverty.
A lot of you were shouting as you came onto this field today that we've got to have climate justice. There's a great risk at the moment that the infrastructure, the green energy, might be funded by private finance. Now, if that happens, in effect what we're doing is privatising climate change. We've got to make sure that doesn't happen. If the climate was a bank, we would have saved it by now. We're going to find a way as the public to save the climate.
One of the things that we were interested in looking at was the nature of the sponsorship behind Green Capital, and notably corporate sponsorship. So, as we know, one of the main sponsors behind Green Capital is KPMG, an accountancy firm that's got international reputation. It's been involved in tax evasion. So there is an ethical concern here behind who's been sponsoring Green Capital.
The European Green Capital Award doesn't itself come with any funding to support it, but what we did have was the absolute buy-in of the City Council. So they put about £1 million behind the Green Capital initiative as a starting point. Because Bristol was the first UK city to ever win this award, there was quite a powerful case to be made to the UK government that they should really also support Bristol.
We got a core of money, £7 million from central government, effectively from DEC. However, a lot of that came with strings attached and was already associated to ongoing initiatives. So there wasn't a lot of flexibility, but that gave us a nice chunk of money to dispense around to community activism. And we needed private funding. So we asked a variety of organizations, predominantly large businesses, Sconsa, First Line, KPMG were tier 1 donors, and they put in significant amounts of money for each. And that does influence your program. I don't think it influenced it a lot. I think those organizations did not come in with high expectations in terms of the agenda being tailored to their interests.
I think for sponsors like First Group, it's really important for them to be agents of change in the city as well. And so by supporting something like the European Green Capital, they both obviously get their brand over everything that's produced, but they also get to be at the table making decisions about how Bristol moves forward, and that could be really good for their business in the long term.
Well, I was very surprised to hear that IKEA was a major sponsor for Bristol Green Capital, given that its business model is built on selling disposable furniture to people, which seems to have quite a short shelf life. So when I heard that, it definitely did sort of compromise my view of what Green Capital was about. I've since read about various initiatives that IKEA has undertaken to make its business model more sustainable. But still, it gives people mixed messages.
We were interested in looking at who was going to be receiving some of the funds that were granted by central government and the local government for the organisation of Green Capital. And one of the things that we found out was that in the distribution of strategic funds, which were from between 25 and 50 grand, the independent assessment panel that was ultimately going to vet who was going to be receiving that money saw some of its members, 2 out of 3, with conflicts of interest. These organisations received money and had key representatives on that assessment panel. So we wanted to basically highlight a lack of transparency because that wasn't mentioned in a register of conflict of interest.
I think the private sponsorship of the Bristol Green Capital is actually largely a very positive thing. The organisations that I know, for example like Burgess Salmon and Triodos, they have lots of schemes that are very in line with the values of the Green Capital year as a whole, and actually can make a real difference, and their money and their support for the year is invaluable.
The one issue that we always worry about is, does the private sponsorship either explicitly or implicitly affect the story that people want to tell? In the Green Capital case, I think it had very, very little impact, but you could argue that by having First Line be a sponsor, did that put more emphasis on buses as opposed to cycling? Probably not, but I think it's a valid question. And even if it didn't, I think it prompts you to ask the questions about why are initiatives like this, why should they be dependent upon private sponsorship? I think in the university we have to ask ourselves, are we truly intellectually independent? And if not, what compromises does that mean that we've made?
In the context of Green Capital, we were keen to point out that the university had huge portfolio of investment in fossil fuels, and that was original research and investigation by the Bristol Cabot that allowed the figures to come out, and then led to a further campaign that was taken up by students and also raised by some councillors.
So last year we wanted to know how much does the university invest in fossil fuels, and so we submitted a Freedom of Information request, and we found out that yes, unsurprisingly, in fact the university, like many institutions up and down the country, does hold stocks and shares in a range of fossil fuel companies such as Shell, Exxon, BP. We're asking that the university make a public statement saying it's committing to divesting from fossil fuels. We're asking that it commit to winding down those investments over 5 years, because we realise you can't do it overnight, and that the university look into investing in renewable alternatives. The Mayor of Bristol, George Ferguson, he's declared that Bristol City Council is fossil free. So we really want the university to align itself with the city.
The student campaign is really putting pressure on the university, which is really, really encouraging. And they actually seem to be making some traction. They've got lots of academics on board to really try and push the university.
Are we doing enough globally about climate change?
No.
Not yet.
Almost certainly not.
I don't think we're doing enough, no, and I think the main area where we're failing is to basically conceive of social inequality and its link to environmental damage and environmental disruption.
I think we do have to face the fact that we do need to reduce our demand for energy, and it can be done through energy efficiency schemes, but I do think that everyone will have to make some lifestyle changes. But it's a positive challenge. I don't think it has to be a negative challenge.
I was at the Copenhagen COP. I think this present COP has much more likelihood of success, partly because the attitude has changed. So the developing countries are coming to this COP not being told what to do, but suggesting what they can do. So I'm quite optimistic, but whatever they agree, I'm pretty sure it will not be enough.
No, I don't think there's enough green space. I don't think we have a say on really what buildings go up. The thing that I like about Bristol is a huge sense of community, and a huge sense that it's a can-do attitude. I think we definitely have a can-do attitude.
What I would like to see is much bigger participation from younger people. It's up to you people to really participate, to really get things to change, not to put up with the present structure that we've got, not to put up with the limitations that are presently being imposed upon us. If that happens, then I think all sorts of things can change and will.
And I think it's important not to keep sort of putting it out there in time. At some point in the future, things are going to go catastrophically wrong. In fact, we're already seeing the effects of global climate change and of resource depletion.
What we need to do is we need to start acting now, not to make the world more sustainable, but to create the opportunity to make it more sustainable in the future. The right rules, the right regulations, the right infrastructure that can then all be adapted to it. We want to be building things that are either sustainable or can be turned sustainable. We don't need to solve the problems tomorrow, but we need to start re-envisioning the world and doing things that let us solve the problems over the next 30 or 40 years. And even then, we're probably still not doing enough.
When I'm with you, baby, I go out of my head. I just can't get enough. I just can't get enough.
Actually, just ask it again, because if you're ever going to be on the video, that's a pretty good question to ask.
Are we doing enough?
Nope.